Hello, and welcome to another episode of Apothecary Wisdom. I'm so glad you're here, spending your precious time with me, because today I want to talk to you about a couple of things that are really important. Last week I got a message and a question from a woman, and the question was really compelling and interesting to me, so I wanted to make this whole episode to answer her question. Her name is Sarah, and this is what she said. She was responding to last week's video, which was called Herbs for Menopause and Menstrual Flooding. And so her question was, in regard to your recent post on menstrual flooding, when should a woman be concerned about spotting 2 weeks after her cycle? She also gave some more pertinent information that's important when you're trying to put all the pieces together to determine what your answer is going to be. Her supporting information was there was no recent sexual activity, no accidents or trauma, and that she's had a tubal ligation about 3 years ago. And so today's episode is going to be all about the 7 possible causes for you to be bleeding in between your periods. And my name is Maria Chaudhry, and I'm a midwife, an herbalist, and the creator of Birth Song Botanicals. And we make nourishing herbal remedies for women and children. And you can find about our products and our blogs and all of our videos and all of our greatness on birthsongbotanicals.com. So, without further ado, let's answer Sarah's question. Let's go over the 7 possible causes that you could be bleeding in between your menstrual cycles. And let's get a better insight and a broader overview of what's happening with our menstrual cycles. It is so important that we have conversations like this because irregular menstrual cycles is one of the leading reasons that women go to the gynecologist because of their abnormal bleeding. And all I'm going to say is, did you know that there are approximately 12 hysterectomies per second that happen in the United States of America? And that statistic was from a textbook that I got 10 years ago. I'm sure it hasn't gotten better. Understanding your menstrual period and understanding what's normal and what's dangerous is essential. Right now, women, no one's coming to save us. It's up to us to learn about ourselves and to share our wisdom with other people. And that's why I'm here. And that's why you're here. And that's why we're doing this together. So, power to the people. All right, let's talk about it. Let's talk about this overview about our menstrual cycles. Essentially, one thing I want to say is your menstrual cycle and length and the quality of your cycle is influenced from your hormones, most notably estrogen and progesterone, but also through your endocrine system, and there's so many other hormones that play a role. Your endocrine system is really sensitive and susceptible to influences, things that happen inside your body and things that are happening outside of you. So some of the things that can influence your cycle are some things you might not even really think about that much, like the amount of sunlight or light that you have in the daytime versus the amount of light or too much light, screens or TV watching or sleeping with a light on or we go to bed really late, long after the sun went down. We have too much artificial light. And that artificial light has an influence on our endocrine system, which can in turn disrupt our menstrual cycle. That influence on our endocrine system can disrupt our sleep, can disrupt our moods, can disrupt our overall health, right? Our ability to cope with stress. Other things that disrupt our immune system, I'm trying to say endocrine system, is traveling. When you travel a lot, that's going to disrupt your amount of exercise. So when you're a marathon runner, I'm really proud of you, but that's going to disrupt your menstrual cycle. What else? If our body mass index and our belly fat, and if we've suddenly lost weight or we've suddenly gained weight, all of that has a role. The health of our thyroid, all of that has a role, and those influences shape what our menstrual cycle looks like. A couple of things I want to talk about with your menstrual cycle is how long it can be. Like a normal menstrual cycle, the average is 28 days, but the range can be 21 days to 35 days for an adult woman, and then 21 days to 45 days for a young teen. And I really wish I knew that as a young teen that had really long cycles. It probably would have saved me a couple of nights of wondering, is this okay? Oh my gosh, is everything... How do you count the days of your menstrual cycle? So from the day that you start bleeding until the next day that you start bleeding. That's the number of days in between your menstrual cycle. That's how long it is. Now your flow, the average is 4 to 6 days. And the amount is 10 milliliters to 35 milliliters. And you're like, well, what's that? I don't know. Let me give you some perspective. When you're looking at a regular tampon, not a supersize, but a regular tampon or a regular pad, those can hold 5 mils. They can saturate 5 mils, like fully soaked, saturate 5 mils. So if a person is bleeding 10 to 35 mils, they can saturate 2 to 7 pads during their menstrual cycle, and that's considered normal. Like, even still, how much is 30 mils? I don't know. Here are some examples. So this little bottle that we have right here, this is 10 mils. This would soak 2 pads or soak 2 tampons. This right here is 30 mils. That's a 1 ounce tincture, right? 30 mils. So the average is 35, so you got to do half this bottle with this bottle, and that'll soak 7 pads, and that's considered normal bleeding. Okay? It appears like so much, and it can be really depleting on your body. A big reason for that is we're not hydrated enough. We're not used to drinking enough water, and so in order for you to be hydrated, just take your body weight, divide it by 2, and that's how many ounces you should be drinking. So a 150-pound girl, 75 ounces of water, right? That's your baseline. You might not feel so depleted, especially if you're soaking 7 pads. Okay? Let's go a little deeper into this whole conversation. There are essentially 4 types of menstrual irregularities or patterns that women experience. You can have amenorrhea when you are not menstruating at all. So like you're pregnant, you have amenorrhea, you're not menstruating. You're postmenopausal, you have amenorrhea, you're not menstruating. You could have anovulation. Anovulation is really the focus of the type of bleeding that we're talking about today. Anovulation means you're not ovulating. You could have short periods and really frequent periods, or you could have long periods and long flow days. Those are the 4 most common categories that women experience some sort of menstrual irregularities. So let's go back to Sarah's question. Her question was, when should women be concerned about spotting 2 weeks after her period? Great question, Sarah. Let's go into the 7 possible reasons you could be bleeding 2 weeks after your period. Once we get all this information, we're going to try to apply it to Sarah's question. So number 1, these are not in any relevance order. It just happens to be the top one on the list. 1 is fibroids, infections, stress, pregnancy or miscarriage, vaginal dryness or atrophy, hormonal imbalances, or a disease like cancer. So let's go in and break these down a little bit. Fibroids are benign, non-cancerous growths that grow either on your cervix or in your uterus. Now, it depends. They can be really small or they can grow really large. And it depends on where they are in your body if they're going to cause a problem and what's happening in your body. So sometimes these fibroids, they kind of ebb and flow like the rest of us. So when they're influenced by hormones, and so sometimes they grow and they're really big and other times they shrink. And so depending on their size and their location, they might be causing the bleeding. If that's one of your concerns, you want to look deeper into that, and you can get an ultrasound to determine the location and size of the fibroids. Okay, the next one is infections. And so infections can range from sexually transmitted diseases to candida or yeast infections or to pelvic inflammatory disease. So this sort of inflammation, these infections cause inflammation. The inflamed tissues can become damaged and they can bleed, and then it can create scar tissue, and that can perpetuate the bleeding. Sometimes these infections and this bleeding is associated with sex because the tissue is damaged, but sometimes not. So if you're concerned about any sort of pelvic infections or infections of your reproductive organs, that could be causing your bleeding. The next one is stress. Okay, we all know it. We all feel it. We live in an overstimulated, maxed out society and life, and oftentimes we don't have the time to pause and take a breath. A lot of times we're not eating accurate foods, or we think we're eating really healthy because we're eating this diet, like the paleo diet or the vegan diet or the vegetarian diet, or eating the eggs or eliminating the dairy. I don't know what you're doing, but you're probably doing something because you feel like it's right for you, and it might be. I'm just here to also remind you that we're so biologically unique, and our microbiome is so biologically unique. There is a potential that sometimes the diet can be stressful. And stress is such a whole huge topic that I could easily get swayed into talking about that. Instead, I'm just going to direct you to the playlist that either is going to say stress or it's going to say something like nervines. And there's a whole bunch of videos that will help you, videos and meditations and herbs that will help you. If you feel like you're feeling the effects of stress and it's influencing your menstruation, do yourself a solid and watch those videos. Okay, the next one, number 4, is pregnancy or possible miscarriage. So now if a woman's having normal menstruation, just like she always is, and now she's spotting, there is a chance that she could be pregnant. You could be pregnant. And spotting is a normal part of early pregnancy. It's a startling part of early pregnancy, but most of the time, if a woman is simply spotting and she has no other signs, she's not cramping, and there's just a little bit of spotting when she wipes, and she's pregnant, you still need to consult your midwife, yet most of the time she's going to carry that pregnancy to term. It's just when there's spotting associated with cramping in early pregnancy, that's a more, a situation that needs more care. And so you could go see your doctor and that would be totally fine. I just really encourage you to have a midwife at your birth so that you have a really empowering birth and that you have the birth on your terms. Okay, now there is a reality of miscarriages are very common, and you could potentially having a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancy, and that's what's causing this bleeding. We know, based on the information that Sarah gave us, that that's not her situation, because the supporting information that she gave us was she hadn't had recent sex and she had a tubal ligation. Okay? So that's not Sarah's situation, but is it yours? I don't know. Leave it in the comments. Let me know. Okay. Number 5. Vaginal dryness or atrophy. So remember, this conversation stemmed from a continued conversation about perimenopause and menopause, and we talked a lot about the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause in those videos, and vaginal dryness is one of those symptoms, and it's a normal part of the aging process. As we age, things dry up a little bit, hence the urgency and necessity to drink enough water. Remember the amount of water that you need. And right now, more than ever, just personal lubrication is more necessary. When there's vaginal dryness, what happens is the tissues get really dry and they get really fragile and friable. And so when there's friction, so either with lovemaking or sometimes even with wiping, there can be bleeding. And the 6th reason is hormonal imbalances. Now, this is a huge topic. We're going to try to just keep it to these couple of reasons. So one of the hormonal imbalance issues could be from dysfunctional ovaries, right? Essentially, it's back to the point I made in the very beginning, anovulation. Since this is a continuation of perimenopause, I'm going to talk about it like this. In the gradual process of aging and going through menopause, our bodies produce less estrogen and less progesterone. Our ovaries are less responsive and less productive, and so then we stop ovulating, and when you stop ovulating, there's bleeding associated with that, and that is a normal part of the changes that go on in your body. That's called dysfunctional uterine bleeding, and when you want to know more about that, watch that video. I elaborate quite a bit. Now, there's another hormonal imbalance that could be happening, and that's with your thyroid. You can have a hyper or a hypoactive thyroid. You could have thyroid issues, or you could have full-on thyroid diseases, and lots of the interconnection between your thyroid and your menstruation are inseparable. And so I'm going to leave it at that. And then another thing that we know is not going to be associated to Sarah's question, because she stated that she had a tubal ligation, but maybe this is appropriate for you to know about, is when you start taking or when you stop taking oral contraceptives, you can have bleeding, spotting before or after your period also. And the last thing that I have on this list right now in terms of hormonal causes is that sudden onset or sudden weight gain and sudden weight loss that can cause your hormones to fluctuate, and that can fluctuate your menstruation. And then number 7 is the most rare. However, it's important that we bring it up, is there's potential of cancer, and having cancer in your reproductive organs, such as in your vagina or your uterus or your ovaries. That cancer, that disease process could be causing the bleeding. And so you clearly want to get help and information and to know how to manage that and treat that. So now that we know that the 7 possible causes, let's go back to Sarah's question and let's try to help her out here. Let's try to answer this for her. Okay, so before we go deep, I want to remind you, I'm not a doctor. I'm a midwife. I don't treat, diagnose, heal, cure, prescribe, anything like that. Also, I personally have never met Sarah. I don't know her, have not seen her, have not done a health history. It would be professionally negligent and potentially dangerous for me to give her health advice or herbal advice, right? What we're going to do is we're going to look at this situation given the information that we have and come up with a supportive answer. Okay? So based on the information that we're given, we can rule out and we can say the bleeding 2 weeks after her period is not from being pregnant. So it's not from being pregnant or having a miscarriage, and it's not from oral contraceptives. But there's a whole long list that it could potentially be, right? We still don't know her stress level. We don't know if she has fibroids. We don't know if there's any infections or candida. We don't know about diseases or cancer, right? We also don't know about her hormonal dysregulation. Is it from the thyroid? We can deduce by the fact that she watched a video about menstrual flooding that she's in a perimenopausal age set, or she's having some sort of experience like that that tends to fit into that age category. And we can remind you that for perimenopausal women, that when you have anovulatory bleeding, meaning when you stop ovulating, you have spotting after your period, and I can remind you that that's a normal part of the perimenopausal process. So I can remind you that. But in other words, what I really want to tell you is like, and maybe you've done this, Sarah, I just don't know, but a person like Sarah, a person in her situation, needs to have a full health history, right? A gynecological assessment and a physical exam, so you can see and rule out and see what's normal and what's pathological. A lot of time, pathological means problem, just in case. A lot of times, normal variations of a menstrual cycle, even though it's irregular, a lot of times they're very responsive to natural remedies and life-affirming practices and meditation and movement and diet change. And a lot of times you start to just kind of synchronize your body and alignment and attunement with nature, and then your body synchronizes. And then other times you need to go deeper and get lab tests and figure things out. Okay. Another question, piece of information that we don't have or know about Sarah's situation is we don't know how long this cycle has been going on, and we don't know how much bleeding she has in her normal period and how much bleeding she's having when she's spotting. She did use the word spotting, so it makes me think it's just scant. However, I don't know that. Nonetheless, the point is she's bleeding 2 times in a month. 2 times in a month can be depleting, right? And so one way that we could support Sarah is to offer some herbs. And when you're offering herbs, you have to remember there are 4 goals of working with herbs in terms of menstrual irregularity. So if you're having an irregular menstruation and you want to look to herbs, these are the 4 reasons and the 4 ways herbs can help you. If you're having an irregular menstruation, meaning you're having flooding or a lot of bleeding, or you're bleeding multiple times in a month, that's prolonged, and you can use and work with herbs to help normalize and reduce the excessive bleeding. In the last video that I made, I went into a lot of detail about these herbs. These herbs are in a category called hemostatic or astringent. Essentially, they help dry up or help reduce the amount of blood that's leaving your body. There was one herb that I mentioned that will really be appropriate, and it's going to fit 3 of these categories, and that's going to be red raspberry leaf, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to go to the next step first. The next reason you would look to herbs to help you is because herbs have this wonderful ability to help correct nutritional deficiencies. Nutritional deficiencies like anemia or depletion lead to fatigue and lead to illness and lead to just pale and weakened, right? Red raspberry leaf is not only astringent, so it can help reduce the amount of blood, but red raspberry leaf is also considered a nourishing herb, and nourishing herbs are high in vitamins and minerals, most notably calcium, iron, magnesium. And nourishing herbs would be found in Women's Balance, and red raspberry leaf would be too. And then also I would give her and suggest for her to look into chlorophyll, because chlorophyll is going to help oxygenate and help restore her iron levels and improve her anemia. The third reason you would look to herbs is to help with the stress. Remember how we talked about your endocrine system is so susceptible to stress? So we want to help women have abilities to cope with stress of living in the modern world. I could totally go off on a tangent about stress, but I'm going to point you again to the videos all about the playlist about stress and nervines. Also, I made a video called The Simple to the Sacred. And once again, red raspberry fits in here. Of course, just brewing a simple cup of tea is not going to fix your problem. However, when we live in a really stressful environment, you're bleeding too much and you're depleted. When you can take a pause and connect with your senses, and you're also not hydrated, so you can make your tea. And when you take the time to connect with your senses, you start to make a simple action into really a profound and sacred action. And on that video, I go into so much more about helping you just go inward and turn even the most simplest things into something really profound. And that'll help with stress relief. So I encourage you to watch that video. And then the fourth goal that herbs have in working with irregular menstruation will be to help harmonize or normalize or regulate your hormones. Once again, I'm going to point you back to those playlists, but I'm going to mention one herb right now that I think is really helpful. And when you read about it in books and when you look about it online and watch videos, you hear people say the number one herb for menstrual irregularities, the top herb for PMS, the best herb for perimenopausal women. So if all these people are saying it like this, then we should maybe pay attention and listen and see if it's a right fit for you. And that's going to be Vitex. Another name for it is chasteberry. Vitex and chasteberry is a tonifying, it's a tonic herb that's not only beneficial for female reproductive organs, but also for male reproductive organs. And it has this wonderful ability to help regulate menstruation and help comfort all these just painful and problematic symptoms associated with painful periods, irregular periods, cramps, excessive bleeding, hot flashes, the list. You know the list? Vitex can help you with that. And we include Vitex in one of our formulas called Menstrual Harmony. Yeah. So let's start to wrap this up and let's go back to Sarah's question. The last part of her question was, when should I be concerned? This is my opportunity to remind you to trust yourself. Go in and trust your instincts. You've been developing your instincts for a lot of years, right? Learning to trust your instincts, right? And now is a perfect time and opportunity to do that. And also trust your body and know that it's wise. At the same time, if in doubt, check it out. That's what I say about everything. And I really mean that. If you're asking yourself, oh my goodness, is this okay? It might really be okay and it might really be normal. Or you might actually need some support, the next level of support with that. And so I really encourage you to find a care provider, a healthcare provider that understands normal physiology of menstruation and normal physiology of the changes that women are going through during menopause and perimenopause, so that you can feel confident, because it's really vulnerable going in and undressing and sharing all about your health and then being whisked through somewhere and their answer is to take Prozac and synthetic hormones when you're like, what? And you didn't even get an answer, right? And so pick someone that can lead you and be honest and real with you, because that's what we need. Okay, so when should you be concerned? There are clear lines, clear reasons to go to the doctor, especially when we're talking about bleeding. If you fill 2 pads, or you soak 2 pads in a half an hour, that's too much bleeding. If you have continuous vaginal bleeding, that's too much bleeding. Those 2 categories, once you get more than 2 pads in a half an hour and continuous vaginal bleeding, that's a hemorrhage. If you have a hemorrhage, you need urgent care. The signs and symptoms of a hemorrhage are lightheaded, ringing in your ears, faint, feeling dizzy, weak, low blood pressure. All of those, rapid heart rate, all of those are signs of a hemorrhage and they necessitate medical attention. If you feel like you're pregnant and you're having bleeding, call your midwife right away. If you suspect that you have one of these previous things we mentioned, fibroids or thyroid issues or cancer or infections or diseases, all of those warrant going to get it checked out. Okay? Remember, my friends, being a woman is beautiful, and being a woman means you will bleed, and not all the blood needs to be scary, gross, or dangerous. But sometimes it's a symbol, it's a symptom, either of our bodies changing and we're aging gracefully and we're going through our wisdom years, or it's a symptom that something's a little bit off and you might just need to come into alignment with a few of your lifestyle practices, or something needs to be really looked at. I encourage you to leave a comment, because today Sarah wrote a comment and asked a question, and it was pertinent, and it related to menstruation and related to menopause, and I was more than happy to make this video to answer her question. And so I'm extending that invitation to you. If you have a pertinent, relevant, kind of exciting, interesting question that relates, then I'll be able to make an Apothecary Wisdom episode or write a blog post about it. So your comments and your questions really matter. This is an example of reciprocity, and that is a word that I really, really love. So as I wrap this conversation up, I want to remind you to watch those other videos, go to our website, push like and subscribe. And until next time, my friends, drink deep and always walk in beauty.